Okay, so good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us on this bright day today. I know some places might be having some rains. And of course, today I'm happy I'm getting a little bit of sun. So hopefully some sun reaches some of you all. Today is the final session of the Caribbean Climate Responsive Agriculture Forum, our 2022 edition. And today we will be sharing one of IICA's projects and some of the actions on the ground. But first, for those of you who may not have been joined us in our previous two sessions, just to give you a brief background and the objectives of the forum. The forum looks at engaging the 13 English speaking. Good morning, Doreen. Welcome.
Thank you.
Yes, so the forum looks at engaging the 13 speaking English IICA member states. And so we would have persons from all the way from Belize to Barbados to Guyana to Jamaica, all the way up to the Bahamas. So we will have a lot of the varying backgrounds there. And the key objective of this forum is to raise awareness and to share knowledge as it relates to climate smart agriculture and practices for the region. And we're also looking to build a community of interested persons to include yourselves right there as we share this information with you in the various countries. And we also want to promote enhanced coordination and collaboration among you, our stakeholders. And one of the key things for us, particularly in this forum, is for us to now link our technical knowledge to practical actions on the ground. And a lot of us go to these sessions and it's just a lot of information, and we try to change that a bit where you can leave these sessions with something hands-on and something you could implement. So today we have with us Ms. Jaime Romany, who will be speaking on the experiences of implementing ecosystem-based adaptation in the Caribbean region. And this is a project being implemented by IICA in Dominica, Antigua and Barbuda, St. Lucia, and Tobago. And so we also have along with her Mr. Craig Thomas, who is the National Specialist for Antigua and Barbuda. And we also have Mr. Ken Coipel, who is the Technical Specialist of IICA in Dominica. And so you'll get some, practical information on the use of vetiver grass as an EBA solution, for using it on slope stabilization, and also going into how can you get some cash out of vetiver grass. And so I will pass you on to Jaime. And just before she begins, I know a lot of you have been asking, yes, a certificate will be provided to persons who have attended at least 2 out of the 3 sessions. So Jaime, I pass on to you to begin.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Nikelia. Let me get the presentation up now. So are you all seeing it, the presentation?
Yes, yes.
Okay, great. Okay, so good morning and hello again. I have this. No. All right. Yes, I am Jaime Romany, here to present on the experiences implementing ecosystem-based adaptation in the Caribbean. Okay, I don't know why it's not. Okay. So firstly, we have been speaking about ecosystem-based adaptation. What is ecosystem-based adaptation, or EBA? EBA solutions can be understood as the intersection that connects several approaches to addressing climate change adaptation, biodiversity and ecosystem conservation, and socioeconomic development, particularly of vulnerable communities. It is the opposite of business as usual. They create strong links between ecosystem conservation approaches and sustainable socioeconomic development. In other words, people are at the center of this approach. I'm hearing a lot of noise in the background. I don't know if that person can be muted. In the Caribbean region, a history of bad farming practices in upland areas contribute to land degradation. The exposure of land to extreme weather events caused by climate change increases soil erosion, land slippage, and poor soil water management. The cost of many climate change adaptation measures is frequently beyond the means of national governments. This is the case especially for hard or gray engineering approaches where retaining walls and gabion baskets are the traditional options. Green engineering is the use of live plants to add structural strength to soil, and it is most often a less expensive option. In this presentation, I am going to focus on the use of the vetiver plant. This slide generally illustrates green engineering in action. In this case, a hillside is exposed to rain. Luckily, green engineering measures are in place to alleviate the potential loss of soil, land slippage, and rapid runoff of water on the slopes. In this case, vetiver, which is planted in hedgerows, act as a natural barrier and measurably slows down the velocity of slope runoff. Vetiver as a green engineering tool. Vetiver is used as a green engineering tool due to the characteristics of its fast-growing, dense, fibrous root structure, which grows vertically and anchors itself deep into the soil, reducing the shear movement of the slope. In this illustration, if these vetiver plants were not present, the land would be vulnerable to a landslip along the dotted lines. Notice that these roots can grow up to 10 feet deep in the first 2 years. Vetiver is a bunch grass and grows in clumps, multiplying up to 150 plants within 1 year of planting. In this way, it forms dense barriers with the ability to slow down the movement of water on slopes. This cross-section shows how runoff is slowed down by the dense vetiver clump, which belongs to a hedgerow. In doing so, the soil particles are slowed down enough to be deposited by the barrier, which would be behind the dense vetiver clump. In time, this deposition of soil behind the clump can act as a safe pathway for farmers to walk on the hillside farms. Let us look at its use in soil water management. Vetiver is a phytoremediator. In other words, it has the ability to remove bad stuff like heavy metals and extra nutrients from soil. It is a C4 plant, and it does not compete with food crop plants for water. It is water and photosynthetic efficient, absorbing carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and fixes carbon to the soil. And we all know carbon is very important for good soil health. Vetiver also brings water deeper into the soil, replenishing the water table. These pictures illustrate how vetiver is used in both land and water to improve water quality. For those who still use latrines, it is useful in taking up extra nutrients such as phosphates and nitrates, as well as moving water further into the soil. This is the right, sorry, right. This is a really good cross-section showing how water, which is slowed down by the hedgerow, now has the time to move vertically into the soil and replenish the water table. My slide isn't moving. Okay. Though it can act like a retaining wall on its own due to its dense fibrous root structure, vetiver can be used to complement traditional gray engineering methods that we use here in the Caribbean. They can be placed higher up from gabion baskets to add more protection from the velocity of runoff. and they can be used to support retaining walls, which may be failing due to undercutting or other factors. On its own, it is a cost-effective tool with an estimated savings up to 80% of the cost of gray engineering structures with the same function. A bonus of vetiver is that its seeds are not viable, making the plant non-invasive. In other words, it will not grow where it is not wanted. And these plants also grow well in our climate and geographical conditions. To recap, vetiver is used as a green engineering tool to address the issues of soil erosion, landslips, and poor soil water management. Its deep fibrous roots, large clump structure, and phytoremediation property make it a natural alternative to other expensive traditional gray engineering practices that we use to alleviate the effects of climate change. In many countries I've seen in the region, I've come across the different names of vetiver. Kus I know is used in India, vetiver in Trinidad, and bedding grass. Sweetroot I think is used in Grenada. So in your country, if you have any local or whatever other names you know vetiver as, it would be really great if you could put it in our chats so I can have more reference to it. Okay, like any engineering tool, there is a process that needs to be followed for that tool to work as intended and serve its purpose. For instance, if we build a wall but leave out steel reinforcement or use a bad concrete mixture, that wall will fail. The effective use of vetiver grass as a green engineering tool is known as the Vetiver System. Let us take a closer look at the process flow for the Vetiver System. First, planning and designing. A comprehensive assessment of the proposed site needs to be done. Here are some questions to be considered. What is the issue? How extensive is the issue? How many vetiver plants would you need? In the case of farming, do you have the space for these plants together with your crops? What are your vulnerabilities? Do you experience drought or flooding? Soil testing, availability of water, access to the location, your climate, for instance, will be factors in figuring out the cost of extra equipment, soil amendments, irrigation systems are needed for the plants to be properly installed and established. The first very important point I need to make here is that plants should never be sourced from a vulnerable location. For example, we will not remove a vetiver plant from the hillside. This defeats the whole purpose of the Vetiver System. So the first step would be to remove a clump, cutting a few inches into the roots. Remember, it will be near impossible to fully remove this plant due to its deep fibrous roots. The leaves are then cut to 10 centimeters in length and the roots trimmed to 5 centimeters. The prepared plants or slips are then placed in water, which should be changed at least once daily to stimulate root growth. After 3 to 4 days, you are now ready to plant vetiver hedgerows. As with most crops, the land is prepared by trimming vegetation just in the general area. It is not necessary to expose the bare soil, a practice which increases the chance of soil erosion and evaporation. Keep in mind that vetiver does not grow well in shade, so avoid areas under large trees. If you are going to plant on slopes, you will need to contour. This is done using an A-frame. It is important that the vetiver hedgerows have a level orientation in order to slow down the movement of water, which is the principle behind the Vetiver System. Your plants should be spaced 10 to 12 centimeters apart on contour This provides enough space for the optimal girth of the mature vetiver clump to reduce the speed of runoff. We now look at a couple incorrect installations of the Vetiver system. Here are two examples where the spacing of vetiver was not optimal and led to further erosion. In the Brian Lara Stadium in Trinidad, they were planted in a diamond formation. You can clearly see soil behind the clumps, but the velocity of water continued at its normal rate and eroded around the plants. At a water treatment plant in St. Lucia, this also occurred, but this further went on to cause slope failure at the facility. In order to fully carry out its function and be well established, like other plants, vetiver grass needs to be happy. To be happy, they should be watered every day for the first 3 weeks. So it is advised that they are planted in the rainy season to save on cost. Weeds should be cleared within 1 foot on either side of the hedgerow to remove competition for nutrients and sunlight, and the grass chopped back at least once per year. These cuttings can be placed right behind the hedgerows to build biomass or used as mulch in other crops. To recap now, when using vetiver as a green engineering tool for climate action, a system needs to be followed for its benefits to be realized. It is not just about planting grass. Its location must be assessed. Plants should be responsibly sourced. There are steps in plant, land, preparation, spacing, and maintenance, which are also critical. The Vetiver system has been used in a regional EBA project in Antigua, Dominica, St. Lucia, and Tobago. Because of its deep root system, Vetiver was used in Dominica, St. Lucia, and Tobago to provide erosion control and slope stabilization in hillside communities. In Antigua, which has a much gentler topography, Vetiver's roles in phytoremediation as well as slope stabilization were applied to Cook's landfill. I am now going to invite Mr. Kent Coipel, National Specialist, IICA Dominica, to talk about how vetiver was received as a prescribed method and what are the lessons learned. Kent?
Good morning. Thanks again. I will just share a quick background to give a sort of a scope in terms of the work done in Dominica, and then to go on to elaborate on some of the interventions through the project as it relates to the use of the vetiver grass. For those of you that are on the call that probably know Dominica, we're working in the eastern coast, and we worked with two main communities, Petit Soufrière and San Sauvé. And the reason why we selected those communities is because of their high vulnerabilities in terms of erosion, as well as Jimmy indicated, the project had a scope dealing with the upland and coastal, the coastal impact based on upland activities. So both communities certainly provide that kind of landscape. We could see exactly what the project was seeking to address in that particular community. Now, I also want to indicate that vetiver, while it's not new to Dominica, the two communities that we are speaking of do not have a history of using vetiver in any large way. We have seen the use of vetiver further up in the northeast, in the Kalinago territory, and some of the other communities on the northeast coast. Now, we introduced vetiver in a number of areas, and I would like to just touch on some of the areas. We looked at vetiver as a remedial action or remedial approach along the roadways, especially in newly cut roads where a lot of the soil or the slopes were exposed, and there was vetiver planted along those slopes, and we have seen some positive impact of the use of the grass. In the past, quite a few of the ornamental crops, or what we call use of things like croton. Well, we use croton to stabilize some of the slopes, and we saw that some of these actions, we would see some erosion still taking place because of the distance the crotons would be planted, the distance from each other. But if the use of the inclusion of the vetiver is certainly one that reduced in terms of the soil being moved into the drains and blockage of the drains, as well as holding the land in the case of the roads, the roadsides. We also use it in new housing development areas where they had quite a bit of movement of soil and backfilling. So the grass was used along the borders, again, to help stabilize some of the slopes that would have been created based on the backfill. And very importantly, in terms of some of the main sites, we inserted or we integrated vetiver into the whole farming system. And as you're aware, in those communities, we have farmers operating on small scales in their backyards in some cases, and also to integrate, they have a more integrated cropping system where they would have things like the bay and other roots and tubers and so on. And in some cases, they're planting on very, very steep slopes. So we have now introduced vetiver as part of the farming system, and we planted it in based on the guidance provided by the IA movement to help reduce erosion. But what was important is we sort of taught the farmers the use of the vetiver, not only in the whole stabilization, but the use of the vetiver in the livelihood aspects in terms of the green business, using the grass, not only for its roots purpose, but also for the leaves, where the leaves can be used as a mulch, as well as to use the leaves in the whole craft industry. So we promote the green business around the vetiver. So that is something that we saw as a positive coming up from the discussion with some of the farmers. We have trained quite a bit of the farmers in, well, especially the women in terms of the craft, as well as the other use of vetiver. We also worked a little outside the community, working with a site at Sylvania. And the reason again is because we wanted to promote the use of vetiver and slope stabilization, but more so to complement other forms of engineering as it relates to land stabilization. We know in the history of Dominica, we have been using the gabion baskets in terms of slope stabilization, but in itself cannot really control. You cannot have the gabion basket throughout the slopes. So that's an advantage of the vetiver that can be spaced at different distance along the slopes to help hold the soil. And we can again complement other form of engineering, and the vetiver seems to be very effective, and we do have that as a demonstration site, or we build into that demonstration site the use of the vetiver. So basically, these are the experiences that we have been exposed to in terms of use of the vetiver, and we're hoping to transfer some of these techniques into other neighboring communities. Thank you, Jimmy.
Thank you, Ken, for the insights on how you use the Vetiver system in Dominica. So we're now going to ask Mr. Craig Thomas, National Specialist of IICA and Antigua and Barbuda, to give us an insight on the application, which is again, at Cook's Landfill and Antigua's lessons learned. Ken, sorry, Craig.
Okay, good morning, everybody from sunny Antigua. Similar to my colleague, Kent in Dominica, I'll give a little background into the project and our experiences in Antigua and Barbuda. But I would like persons to take note of my background, and that background basically is the location of where we are implementing the activity. That is the area called Hanson's Bay, and that is the largest mangrove swamp in Antigua and Barbuda. And so the implementation site is actually at the base of this bay, which is adjacent to the old Cook's landfill, which is a sanitary landfill. The vetiver grass is not a grass that is invasive to Antigua and Barbuda. it basically has been growing in Antigua and Barbuda. However, due to the expansion of our residential area, the areas which occupied the vetiver grass would have been now used for housing. So presently, we don't have that large area of vetiver grass present in Antigua and Barbuda. So when this project basically arrived, we were able to source the vetiver grass, 6,500 slips from Dominica. Again, sourcing those slips from Dominica, we actually followed all the phytosanitary rules and regulation, where Dominica and Antigua and Barbuda, the Ministry of Agriculture, played a huge role for the transfer of those slips to Antigua. As I said before, the implementation site is located at the old sanitary landfill, which is known as the Cook's landfill for those persons who are from Antigua. And that area would have posed a number of challenges which we would have experienced during the implementation phase. We started to implement the project at that area in October of last year, during which that is the time where you will have heavy rainfalls. So we had heavy rainfalls during the month of October, the month of November. And so we would have planted over 5,000 slips of vetiver grass. And so for those persons who know Antigua, we are considered one of the driest country in the region. So when it got to around January of 2022, we experienced some prolonged droughts. So what you're seeing here in some of the photos where you see drip irrigation systems set up, water harvesting catchments set up, these were not originally a part of the plan, because we were of the opinion that we could have planted these plants down at the implementation site and have them grow in this environment. And it's a lesson learned for us that not talking about vetiver grass, but plants in general, this is something that we're going to have to take into consideration whenever you're going to establish any sort of planting in a particular area. We have to take into consideration the climate change that usually affects the country. So what we would have done through our partners with CADI and the Ministry of Agriculture, we were able to design a gravity feed drip irrigation system using 1,000-gallon tanks, where we divided up the space. So we had 3,000 feet of vetiver grass in 3 rows, and we divided up each row into 300 to 400 feet to facilitate the drip irrigation system. One of the lessons learned that we gathered from this project is that the planting of the vetiver grass, or grasses in general, the root system, or the root system in terms of how you go about planting these plants, it's something that we learned, where we had to consider planting these plants in bags, mixing the soil with the soil from the landfill with soils from where we have the nurseries, so that the plants can establish a good root system before we would transfer them. Because this area is an area that is has a high saline content, and with that you have a lot of leachate of toxic chemicals coming from the old landfill, which basically posed a problem. So with implementation of the drip irrigation system and establishing plants, transferring plants with established root system to the site, assisted the project in a good way. One of the photos that you also see in here is a photo where there was some inundation of the plants that were previously planted in October. The area in Hudson Bay, whenever there is high rainfall, the mango would basically come close to the Cook's landfill. So again, that basically taught us a lesson where we had to change some of the design in terms of how we're going to plant and where we're going to plant. And from recent photos from areas that now are, that has a lot of water because it has been raining in Antigua, but in Antigua for the last couple of weeks. But those plants, now that they have established, the high saline water from Hudson Bay is not affecting those plants. So these are some of the things that we need to consider whenever we are going to establish any sort of introduction of any plants, whether fruit trees, grasses, any sort of plant. These are some of the things that you have to take into consideration. The climate conditions during the dry period and also during the wet period. And I said we would have learned that because of the location of where we were, the introduction of a drip irrigation system would have saved this project somewhat. And the plants, now that they have been there for a year, have now established them and have now adapted. And I think this is one of the objectives of the project, is to have an adaptation approach to introduction of these plants in this particular area. Similar to my colleague Kent, there's a green business component in this project. And to date, you have persons in Antigua and Barbuda who would have learned through training from facilitators from Trinidad, how they can basically utilize or add value to the vetiver grass. And you have persons here making soaps, craft materials, beverages. When I say beverages, wines, oils, and persons are also utilizing the vetiver grass as a landscaping mechanism, especially if you live on slope area. So we in Antigua are making use of the vetiver grass, similar to making use of other plants that we can adapt so that we can actually add value and basically make a business out of it. Thanks, Jaime.
Thank you so much, Craig, and I hope that you can send some sun for us here in Trinidad. You know, this definitely gives us so much to think about when trying to implement green engineering using vetiver. So before I go on to talk about experiences in Tobago, I must mention we did have a specialist from St. Lucia with us today. But I must mention that there are sometimes local stigma against vetiver. The case in St. Lucia is that vetiver is thought to attract snakes. There were instances where hedgerows had to be removed because a neighbor felt unsafe, and with the grass being nearby. So local culture is another factor to consider when installing the vetiver system, when assessing and deciding to move on. I don't know why this screen is okay. So we now move on to Tobago. In Tobago, the vetiver system was used in the hillside community of Charlottesville and in farmlands in Bloody Bay. One of the main steps that was not carefully followed was in the suitability of a site. Although the community saw the importance of having vetiver planted close to their homes in Charlottesville, the team who implemented it did not consider that most of the residential areas there were shaded by large trees. The plants spent most of their energy trying to get sunlight and grew very thin and tall. Without the proper development of its leaves, the plants were also not able to develop roots and multiply. Many plants survived, but could not serve their purpose as a green engineering tool. In most areas, plants were left unattended and unmaintained after planting. Dealing with dry conditions and an overgrowth of weeds around it during the rainy season also left the plants undeveloped, and the expected growth was not observed. This is being rectified now, and we look forward to seeing the vetiver system in action in Tobago very soon. In October 2021, close to 5,000 plants were installed along the Bloody Bay riverbank. This was done to protect the loss of soil in farmlands there. However, a couple of weeks after, there was an intense rainfall event, and 80% of the plants were lost from landslips along the riverbank. This is in line with the importance of considering the vulnerability of a site when designing a vetiver system. Lastly, knowledge sharing through the posting of signage is also really important when installing in a public space. Maintenance workers have the tendency to get rid of anything green, especially grass. So in Tobago, many hedgerows were lost due to a disconnect in communication about the purpose of vetiver and its maintenance. So I now move on to some applications of the vetiver system. These pictures show how the vetiver system is applied in residential areas to provide slope stabilization, which is threatening infrastructure. Larger installations were done in a commercial area to prevent soil erosion and to help control some flooding that happened in that area as well. The application of vetiver system was successfully used in quarry rehabilitation in Trinidad and in St. Lucia by adding biomass and preventing soil erosion. All right, application in agriculture. In Trinidad hillside farms, the vetiver system has been well integrated with crops by providing land stabilization and soil erosion control. As Kent would have mentioned, the farmers need to understand the importance of integrating a system to prevent loss of land. Without it, they will not be able to grow their crops in any case. So these pictures show the hedgerows actually preventing further landslips and also used with seasonings that are grown in Paramin. Here we see its use in farming by providing a raw material to use as mulch with the benefits of adding ground cover for weed control, erosion control, and soil water control, and also adding extra biomass and nutrients which are beneficial to crops. Because vetiver has the ability to draw water to its deep, dense roots, it is used in companion planting with other crops to provide some moisture around the roots of those important crops. So they're planted in circles around the food crop. So to recap, the vetiver plant is very versatile, and its leaves, roots, and dense growth characteristics make it a preferred choice as a green engineering tool. Earlier, I mentioned that EBA is people-centric and that it provides some sort of socioeconomic benefits. We also heard from Antigua and Dominica on the green business opportunities. So let's look now at how further into how vetiver is used in green business. For climate action to be sustainable, there should be a link between green engineering and green business. This was done regionally through capacity building on vetiver handicraft, in addition to the vetiver system, which was previously described. The picture shows the various ways in which people can earn an income through vetiver handicraft and other applications, such as roof thatching and essential oil production. Now looking at how the vetiver leaves are generally used in handicraft. So these graphics show how the vetiver grass can be harvested. Remember, at this stage, it can be prepared to, it can be used as mulch, either as long leaves or cut into smaller pieces to fit its application. After the leaves are dried, it is plaited into long vetiver ropes and then weaved by the crafters to make many products, such as fashion accessories, handbags, and to upcycle old furniture like chairs, tables, and lamps. You know, it's very diverse in its application. Now we look at the use of its roots to make money. Vetiver roots can be dug up as deep as possible, though this process can be very tedious. Remember again, not to remove these roots in any vulnerable areas. The roots are washed, dried, and tied in bundles and placed in clothing drawers and food cupboards because it acts as a repellent for undesired insects and it has a sweet, earthy aroma. That's why it's used it is very popularly used as essential oils. So essential oils are produced through steam distillation, and it's an ingredient in many perfumes and can be used to make Vetiver soaps, which is very popular with some of the countries such as Antigua. The diverse use of the vetiver plant has created many avenues for green business development. An example is the development of a brand, House of Vetiver, in Trinidad, which gives crafters a means of having their items marketed and sold. And as individuals, the creativity of crafters give rise to many biodegradable items that are sought after in times where there are efforts in innovative and recycle, reuse-oriented product development and solutions with low carbon footprint, which are needed to decrease the effects of global warming. The use of how do we make money now from green engineering services? There are many economic opportunities from the sourcing of plants, from nurseries, the preparation of plants, and of course, from providing the Vetiver system as a service. And we must also acknowledge the opportunity to make money from the sale of mulch, which is created from the non-invasive vetiver grass, which is a valuable commodity for farmers. So I conclude, the engineering works in various disciplines are necessary to improve our lifestyle. Green engineering, which focuses on more natural ecosystem services for climate action, can be sustainable. I refer again to the sustainable development diagram with EBA at the center, and with Vetiver at the center as an EBA tool, providing climate change adaptation, biodiversity and ecosystem conservation, as well as socioeconomic benefits to people. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Jaime, for the presentation on the use of the Vetiver as an EBA solution in the region. Also, thanks to Craig and Kent for your input on the experiences in Dominica and Antigua. We do have on with us, I'm not sure if Diane is still on the Trinidad, if you want to just, add in anything. If also Chani, you would want to just come in, add in anything before we go into the question section. So for the question section, persons, you could raise your hand, ask your question, or you could type your question in the chat.
Hi, Nikilia. Good morning, everybody. And again, thank you for your presence. Just to underscore what Jaime, Kent, and Craig said, this whole ecosystem-based adaptation is really a blend and a mixture of green engineering and green business. It cannot be one or the other. It can be one done at one point in time and the other follows. It really has to be a blend of the two, because for green engineering solutions to continue to be sustainable, to continue to work, it has to generate some kind of revenue, right? And then in the terms of green engineering, using the experience of the project was in using the vetiver grass, because that was the main actor for this particular project. But as Chani will tell you, other grasses could be used based on their properties. So the vetiver grass is something that is very familiar to Dominica and St. Lucia and Tobago, but that familiarity doesn't necessarily mean that there is a system to using it for green engineering. So this project introduced a system of using the vetiver grass that can provide green engineering solutions as well as generate green business. And with every systems, like people in agriculture will know, with every systems, there's not a one size fits all. So therefore, when you apply it to different situations and contexts, it may mean that the practical experiences will require that you do some tweaking. So the models and the systems are always open to tweaking, because again, green engineering solutions really have to be fit to context. And that is what this project's experiences has been. And this is how we have been able to work with the project. So thanks for the attention. And we're really hoping that all of the experiences and lessons learned will be more widely shared and more widely adopted by communities. And again, it's important to note that the capacity to do those green engineering solutions has to be built in communities, and in order for the whole thing to be sustainable for climate action.
Thank you very much, Diane, for this added context there. We will start taking the questions now, and we do have some in the chat. So I will just read out the questions we have so far. And persons, you could just raise your hand and talk if you have a question. So far we have Maurice, do you want to ask a question? So our first question we have there is, then one of the team could decide who will answer. How far away from retaining walls should vetiver be planted? And what is the danger if the vetiver is not pruned yearly when it is near to a retaining wall? So the team could decide who to answer those. Jamie, anybody there?
Hi, Nicolia. Yes, well, if it is not pruned, the risk of it is not being a robust, healthy soil. What is going to happen is the grass and the clump, after a year, it gets it dries up. So it kind of cuts off space and room for more new leaves to grow. So if you keep trimming it, it also stimulates root growth. So to make the clump get, divide a lot faster and get denser. And if it's not done in a year, the plant will survive, but it just will not grow as well as it can grow. In terms of, I know we have vetiver specialists here. In terms of the application to the, how close to the retaining wall, I don't know if anyone of the vetiver specialists can give that information.
Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Nikolai Manuel. I am one of the technical specialists who was responsible for some of the training that the communities would have undertaken throughout the program. So I'll be able to answer a lot of your guys' questions that you have related to the Vetiver system. So as it relates to how close you could plant it to infrastructure, more often than not, the answer might actually be right to the edge of it. That way it would act as an effective physical barrier to prevent any excess siltation from moving over the wall. And it would also slow down and prevent moisture from actually reaching to the face of the retention wall. So just a couple inches off is fine, maybe 6 inches from the retaining wall to allow it some space to full out as a clump. But close to the infrastructure is fine. We've not seen instances of the roots going downward and damaging infrastructure. It kind of grows along the form of the infrastructure and usually goes much deeper than the infrastructure itself.
Okay, thanks, Nikolai. The next question, I believe, Kent, you might be able to answer this one. Where can the vetiver be sourced in Dominica? Somebody wants some information on where they can source it.
I actually placed something in the chat.
Okay.
We certainly can link the person to a number of suppliers, including the nursery that was established under the project. So we have a number of persons supplying vetiver slips. So that is something that once they can reach out, we can reach out to them and link them with the suppliers.
Okay, thanks.
Hi, good morning again. Can I
Good
speak
morning.
now?
Yes, Doreen, you could go ahead.
Okay. As stated in my application, I am on 2 acres of land, but the land used to be cane farmland and it was down for a number of years. what I'm experiencing is waterlogged, and everything that I have planted, the leaves are yellowing. And I don't know what to do to release the water. The vetiver, based on what I've just heard, it retains water, but I don't want to use that that will hold the water in the land. I want the water to get out because it's really damaging everything I plant. What to do?
Okay, Doreen. So is it a flat? From what I'm understanding, it's flat cane land.
No, it's a slope. It has a slight slope.
Okay, it's okay. So very slight slope. And all the area is retaining moisture. Okay,
Yes,
so what
yes.
the vetiver is, what the
It's a
vetiver would
5-acre
do.
plot. It's a 5-acre plot that a group of us have occupied and planted, but everybody is complaining about the same thing: waterlog.
Okay, what you would find happening if you plant vetiver in that situation where there's excessive water in the soil is actually going to remove the excessive water from the soil. So you might actually have a very robust growth of the vetiver. So you would have very nice, healthy, bushy leaves in the vetiver because it's sucking up a lot of that water. Domestically, it's used to treat septic tanks and latrine systems when they're left abandoned. Usually the same situation you describe in the area tends to get very waterlogged and moist. So you utilize the vetiver, you could plant it in that area, and over time it would also act as a phytoremediator to remove the coliforms and any dangerous heavy metals that would be in the soil, but it would also suck up a lot of that moisture, right? So if you do have a lot of that excessive moisture, it would work to effectively wick away a lot of that. And during a heavy flood event, it would retain that, it would slow down the runoff and capture a lot of the siltation and the soil. So you wouldn't lose any material, right, through the slowing down of the water. But it wouldn't affect like the total drainage of your soil then, so to say.
Okay, thanks. Okay, thank you. But okay, now I am calling from Trinidad, but based on your knowledge, you know, anywhere we can get vetiver to purchase in Trinidad?
Yes, Doreen. Well, you could reach out to the organization I work with, I Am Movement. We actually do a lot of projects as well in Trinidad with the vetiver grass. Yeah, so yeah, you could reach out to me.
What place can I reach out to?
Oh, I Am Movement. It's attached to my name.
I am Movement. And where is that?
That's at Diego Martin.
Diego Martin. Do we have a number for it?
I do. I could give you after.
Yes. We'll provide some of those details in the chat and also send it via email after the session. So Chani,
information. I'll pass it on to my group so we can alleviate that problem. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
You're welcome, Doreen. And in terms of the whole water management on your farm, there will ask Dr. St. Martin to provide some more information there for you.
Yeah, thank you, Doreen, for the question. I want to also just say that the issue of drainage, and that's the issue of water, and I haven't seen your farm yet, but like any other crop or any other animal or thing, there is a tolerance level in terms of how much a plant could actually tolerate the water there. So in instances where you do have a slope or you do have the roots being wet, whether it's vetiver or another plant here, vetiver cannot withstand all continuous flooding of or wet roots for a continuous period. You do get a reduction in growth if it is puddling there and it is very continuous. So one of the things that is almost universal for any plant, and I would suggest that in the case of vetiver to amend the potential of vetiver, is the issue of ensuring that you have some good drainage actually put in drains, normally at the head of your farm. If it's on a slope, the storm drain there, so you control the water is coming there. And you also put to the bottom here, or you have a drainage near to the places that you would have a lot of the puddling of the water. So I wanted to add that there, it's very contextual, but anytime you have water settled in, particularly on the slope, you want to start talking about drainage contours and trying to get the water out of the place where it's settling, because any plant that is not a water loving plant or has a particular threshold, no matter how good it is in terms of absorbing water, it will be negatively affected. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Cheney, for that. We will ask now Mortimer. Correct me on the pronunciation there. You can go ahead and ask your question.
Thank you very much, and good morning.
Good morning to you. Go ahead.
In 2004, I have tried to rehabilitate a mined out area. It was a slope, it mined spoil, sandy soil, with using vetiver as a erosion control. During the beginning of the rainy season, and during the rainy season, it worked very well because we can see the buildup of soil in front of where the water is coming down. But during the dry season from September, October, it just didn't work. It just died out. It just didn't stay. Just trying to show that's my experience with the vetiver.
Okay, thanks for your experience. There also persons are free to share the experiences with various EBA solutions, not just the vetiver grass, but this was just the main focus under this project. Thanks for your contribution there. Diane, you wanted to add anything before we go on to the next?
Yes, Nicolia, I noticed that some persons, particularly a question from St. Kitts and Nevis as to where they can get the vetiver. What I want to emphasize is that part of the project, and I think Jamie mentioned it clearly, don't just go rooting up clumps of vetiver in areas that are deemed vulnerable, like on slopes. So one of the important elements of the project was to establish nurseries to propagate vetiver. So each of the project countries had to actually set aside some flat land to propagate the vetiver slips to be used for the green engineering solutions. So for example, St. Kitts is close to Antigua and Barbuda. So Antigua and Barbuda, 2 vetiver nurseries were established, one of an NGO and one of the ministries. So given that the project had already established the process and the experience of preparing and shipping vetiver slips from Dominica to Antigua, then it could be facilitated whereby anybody in St. Kitts and Nevis that has an interest in using the vetiver for green engineering and eventually for handicraft, that a similar arrangement could be facilitated by shipping vetiver grass from Antigua into St. Kitts and Nevis to do, whether it's a community-based stabilization or whether it's to help them with whatever they want to do. So in addition to Trinidad and Tobago supplying Tobago and Trinidad, where you can get it from IAM movement, those other 3 ECS countries would have established propagation for the vetiver. And anybody who's already propagating other crops could expand their propagation business by adding vetiver to their propagation nurseries to supply people who want to use the vetiver as a green engineering solution for slope and soil erosion. So I just wanted to make that point.
Okay, thanks very much there, Diane. I will take Erica and then I will read out some of the questions from the chat. Go ahead, Erica. Erica, are you there with us? Yes, I'll take the question from the chat. If vetiver is a phytoremediator, do the contaminants it removes from the soil and water become concentrated in the plant and passed on? Erica?
Yes, good morning. Come on, help me now. Yes, good morning. Can you hear me now?
Yes, I could hear you. Go ahead, ask your question.
Yes, I'm very grateful for this this episode. It's very interesting. I was just wondering if vetiver roots could help with controlling nematodes in the soil. What you done, Tiffany?
We've not done research into if it could control specifically nematodes, but the roots do have some pest control properties where they have a very, very unique, very good smelling actually, essential oil in the roots that's used for perfumes. And it has been known to keep away several insects and different types of bugs. As it relates particularly to nematodes, I can't comment on that.
Hi, Kelly, I'll jump in here too. In terms of its insect repellent properties, I saw a question. It's used in food cupboards because it repels cockroaches, notably, and ants. That's why it's used in cupboards, and it's the root bundles.
Right, because someone was asking that you mentioned it repels some pests, and so that would have answered this question. The next question I started reading, if vetiver is a phytoremediator, do the contaminants it removes from soil and water become concentrated in the plant and passed on when we use its products, or does the plant destroy the contaminants completely?
Okay, yes, that's a great question. Yes, so the plant acts as a bioaccumulator. So it effectively removes the contaminants from the soil. But yes, it does have to go somewhere, and it does enter into the plant itself. So if you are utilizing the Vetiver system for phytoremediation, and you're actually utilizing it to remove contaminants from soil, you're not going to want to utilize that material for personal use, because you could expect it to have heavy metals in it, right? It doesn't destroy the heavy metal material. In instances where it's used as a floating pontoon in aquatic systems, the grass is regularly cut and removed from the system to encourage new growth and new removal of contaminants from the liquid or from the physical environment.
Okay. Kwesi, we will take you now.
Yes, good day all. Following a part of this, Kwesi Goddard from St. Lucia. I was just wondering, I heard earlier in the presentation that the Vetiver, or the vetiver, we say Vetiver, like one of the common names in St. Lucia when we refer to it among the other grasses we use. But I was wondering about the part where Vetiver seems to make a haven for snakes, and if there are any considerations as to how in these situations, because I'm sure it's not in every place, but it's probably in places where you have populations of snakes. How are there any considerations for remedying this part, and also are there any recommended technical packages that we can share? Thanks.
Okay, hi Kwesi, that's a good question as well. Okay, so vetiver, the reason why it would attract snakes or insects is because of the nature of the leaves itself. It's very bushy and very shady. So if you have a large expanse of land where you're growing crops or where you've left it empty, and you have a section that has this nice lush cool area of grass that has a lot of moisture around the base or the crown of the plant, because as Jamie mentioned in the presentation earlier, it is continuously wicking water up from very, very deep within the soil. You're gonna find that animals are drawn to it. So to prevent that, you can spray it like any other crop with insecticide or insect repellent to keep away, insects, as you would practice, I guess, trying to repel snakes at any other part of your home. Not with black disinfectant that would kill any regular plant. That would not be good for any plant health. But there is, I guess, insecticide or deterrents to keep snakes and other insects away from your crops that would be applicable on vetiver.
Okay, great. Dr. Weeks, you could go ahead and ask your question.
Yes, my question had to do with the use of vetiver to help to take some of the heavy metals that they say is in sargassum seaweed. I use the seaweed a lot in composting, but recently I got several articles. I'm doing a project now where I'm also doing composting and demonstrating, etc. But I got this article that pointed out that there is a lot of heavy metals in the seaweed, and it was like a warning that we should investigate before we continue to use. I was wondering, from what I've heard here of vetiver, does anyone think that somehow maybe it can help in removing some of those? For instance, I know the last meeting you had, we spoke of rinsing out the seaweed and throwing away that water. So I'm wondering if maybe growing or just putting it in some water along with the seaweed, whether you think that can help with removing the heavy metals.
Dr. Weeks, well, it's a great hypothesis, and we're actually doing a lot of work in Trinidad with the University of the West Indies to try to understand a bit of the phytoremediation properties as well. So yeah, there's a lot of new stuff that we're working on. There's a lot of existing evidence as it particularly relates to the sargassum. I wouldn't be able to answer. But we ourselves have come across the same data when we are trying to do quarry rehabilitation ourselves, where we've tried to channel some of the sargassum into the degenerated lands to hope for good breakdown and regeneration of soil. But we've also come across the same thing as you, that they do not recommend utilizing the sargassum because of the bioaccumulation of those heavy metals. What I can say for sure is if the metal is like, if there is an area where you have dumped the sargassum seaweed and it's decomposed, and you need to do something about that, you can then place the vetiver grass into that area. It likely will grow as well because it is tolerant to some saline conditions. So the salt from the grass shouldn't be too extreme for it, especially if you say you washed it out before. And the chances of it actually rehabilitating and removing the heavy metals that the sargassum would have brought into the soil is quite high. So that one is likely, but for the specific situation that you're talking about, I wouldn't be able to say definitively yes or no.
Okay. Right. So you do not think it could be removed from water? It has to be removed from soil. So I was thinking water.
It can be removed from water. And they do use pontoon systems, floating pontoon systems, where they grow the vetiver hydroponically in a aqueous solution and they remove the heavy metals from the water. But in that case, you in that case and on the land as well, you consistently have to get rid of the new leaf material, because the leaf material would now become the bioaccumulator of the heavy metal. And you would have to dispose of that responsibly in any manner.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Nikolai. And of course, with everything, it is best to avoid introducing the salts and the heavy metals on your land in the first place. So I will just ask Dr. Chatney to weigh in a bit more on your question, Dr. Weeks.
Okay. Yeah, no problem. Thank you, Dr. Weeks. Nice, very relevant question. Nice to actually see you and hear your voice again. The issue there, and I would like to extend it to not just a particular product, but as a general practice, or perhaps a best practice. I know that there's a tendency to generalize, and I know also within a particular condition, persons may not have the resources to perhaps do what I'm suggesting here, but I think that anything that we are going to use, particularly for composting, it needs to be characterized. So for example, I am not going to be, there's an overall concern about heavy metals and the heavy metal concentration in biota or living things in the ocean, whether it's fish, sargassum, etc. That is an overall concern, particularly in industrial places there. So that is one thing here. The basic tenet here is if you could check the metal content, it is not that every time, every single batch of sargassum perhaps may have that heavy metal content, but the issue becomes whether you as a practitioner are able to assess that heavy metal content. And I'm saying if you are, particularly from a project point of view, then you should really check to see if that hazard that is being posited is actually exists here. So that's number one. It's just a variable check here. That's number one. Number two is that if you're using sargassum here and you are interested in getting out the heavy metals, the wetting, or what we call the retting of the sargassum, it is only going to be relevant depending on the type and the state of the heavy metal in the sargassum. So if it is water soluble, then obviously the water would be able to solubilize it and get it through the water here. If it is not, water soluble in the particular form that it exists in the plant, then the water would essentially do nothing unless it changes the form to be water soluble. So that is one thing to note there as relate to not just sargassum, but materials that you will generally use for composting and perhaps how you could frame your mind for phytoremediation. The question becomes now in my head, is there a substantial tech pack to really inform how these things are supposed to do under what condition? I think that that is what Nikolai was aiming at in terms of the issue of the wetting or the soaking of the sargassum. It is really mainly for the issue of salts, right? Not too much yet for the issue of heavy metals. However, if the heavy metals exist in a form where it could be dissolved in the water, then it is also sensible to do that. But if it does not exist in that form, then it is not the most sensible thing. You're still stuck with your heavy metal issue. One more thing with that in terms of vetiver now and using it as a phytoremediation system. Again, vetiver is just one of many plants that could be used for phytoremediation. The issue with vetiver, and there are different plants, is that a metal, heavy metal, perhaps exists in a plant in the soil in a particular way. Depending on the type of metal, heavy metal and the form that it is, when it is assimilated into the plant, it could either be in that same form in the plant, or it could actually change the form that it is in the plant. What is the relevance of that? Sometimes, even when it is in the plant, if it is now locked in a particular way that it does not create that bioactivity or that inference of that bioactivity, then that means even if it exists, but not in a form that could be detrimental to the biota or the process of interest. And so therefore, yes, you could move, it is a good practice to move the leaves of the plants that would have accumulated the heavy metals. But in some cases, and even in some soils, you have a high metal content, but it is trapped in a particular way that it does not interfere with, or it cannot be absorbed by the plants, but made bioavailable. And so therefore, even in some plants in the leaves, it could also not be bioavailable unless it is acted upon and then it releases into that hazardous form. So I just wanted to leave that there for clarity as we have the discussion. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Chani. And some of the questions in the chat, you could just check the chat. Diana is responding to as much of them as she can, particularly those asking about the crafts and also accessing the vetiver grass. I will take some other questions that were in the chat. How can the grass be controlled when it is integrated with other crops, or can it be used with only specific crops? And how strong is this plant to act as a soil support system for lands that are prone to landslides? And is it wise to plant in clay soils? I know Jamie would have spoken on the root system being one of the key factors there in terms of slope stabilization, but Nikolai, or Jamie, you could go ahead.
No, just quickly with the roots, with it being able to hold up the land, because the roots go vertically and deep down, the plant has been shown to reduce the shear strength of the movement of the soil that would slip potentially in the weak areas by 40%. In terms of planting it with other crops, I don't think it's an issue to plant it with. It's not a problem if you plant it with tomatoes or cabbage or different kinds of crops. I have not come across that yet. And when you're doing it with the other crops, it can be trimmed back. I don't know, every 2-3 months, it can be trimmed back to reduce the amount of space it would take up if left to bunch out into the full grass. I guess Nikolai can speak more on that.
Yeah, so an important point to remember for the entire vetiver system is that it is a non-invasive plant. It's a very important characteristic of the vetiver grass. So if I plant a clump, is only ever going to grow into a particular thickness, and that's going to be it, right? It's not gonna run like a cane grass or the razor grass. Is going to stay exactly where it is. A lot of people are more familiar with lemongrass or fever grass. The one I used to make tea is very similar in the family to that, where if you have to make if you have to propagate it, you have to split the plant up, right? So it's only ever gonna grow into a clump. So when you plant it in a continuous hedgerow, or if you plant it around a tree, is only gonna remain there, right? It's not gonna run and interfere. Because the roots grow straight down, you're gonna have a very predictable pattern as to where your roots are gonna go. So you could, you could know whether or not it's gonna interfere with anything. But so far, there's only been beneficial cooperation with plants and with longer term crops.
Okay. So the two other questions is somewhat looking at, companion. So will it work well with cocoa trees as a companion plant, and can it be used as a cover crop in backyard gardening? I know, for example, with cocoa trees, as Jimmy would have mentioned, the vetiver needs a lot of sun, and with the cocoa trees, definitely there will be too much shading. So probably
Yes.
the best approach would be more on the outskirts of the plot. So Nicola, you could go ahead there.
Yeah, that's exactly right, Nikilia. So it would not grow in shade. The plant would survive, but it would remain as the one, we call it a slip, an individual plant. It's called a vetiver slip. It would remain just as one slip. It would grow into its leaves, but it would never multiply. And in plenty of the cases, it would die because it's just too shady. It's a grass. And if you notice, a common thing about all grasses is none of them grow in the shade, right? They always stretch for the sun. So depending on the coconut plot, you can plant it, as Nikilia mentioned, on the outskirts of the plot to prevent any runoff during a flood situation. That would keep your topsoil on the plot, which is always beneficial for the nutrients of the plant. And you could use some of the leaf cuttings as mulch around the coconut, around the trees. But that's about as much as I think you would be able to do in that situation.
Hi, Nikilia, one more thing on that. I think it can be grown if it's not a mature, is it cocoa trees or coconut? Cocoa?
Cocoa.
Okay, yeah, for cocoa. So if you can do something with succession planting. So if it's a mature plantation, no, it can't be used there because of the shade. But if you're newly planting cocoa crop, yes, you can put vetiver plants around that small plant. The vetiver is able to get enough sunlight, then it's able to complement the newly planted cocoa tree. When the cocoa tree develops, it no longer needs the vetiver. It doesn't need to be supported. So the vetiver will eventually die off. It's not needed, and it can be beneficial in that way.
Thanks, Jamie. Someone was also asking in terms of they want to plant it on their fence and wants to know if it will be invasive to their neighbors. And as Jamie would have been mentioning, that it is not a plant that spreads, so it will not be invasive. Diane, you can come in and weigh in there, and after Chani, you could go ahead.
Okay, thanks, Nikilia. I'm not going to weigh in on the invasiveness because I think it was established. But what I'm going to weigh in on is one of the comments in the chat that the colleague from, I believe, St. Kitts talked about, that they did establish a vetiver nursery on the project some time ago. When the project ended, everything fell apart. And this is why, under the whole EBA concept, the need to inextricably link green engineering solutions to green business solutions is critical. And that is why through this project, we are making a double effort, not just to use the vetiver as a green engineering solution for soil erosion, soap stabilization, water cleaning, and so forth in the soil, but also that it can generate business by the handicraft and by the home and body products. And without a demand for the leaves for handicraft and any other kind of business, you're going to find nobody's going to be able to maintain vetiver nurseries and that is why we're also trying to ensure that the vetiver nurseries themselves be pitched as a green business. But we have to create the demand for the vetiver grass in order for those nurseries to be sustained beyond the project. So there is always a catch-22. The projects promote those things. Everybody understands the benefit of those things. The project provides the resources for nursery establishment, for nursery maintenance, for site installation, and so forth, for training in handicraft. But when the project ends and there is nothing to take it forward, those things tend to slowly but surely just die off a natural death. And I'm saying the entire EBA approach, the entire EBA principle is premised on the fact that you must be able to generate viable green business from any kind of green engineering or EBA solution. So the effort and the focus on training for handicraft, on training to do products from the leaves has to be almost as 100%, almost more than the green engineering solutions. So it's important that the takeaway is you can't or you should not separate a green business solution from a green engineering solution, because it has to be sustained one way or the other.
Thanks, Diane. You can go ahead now, Chan.
Yeah, colleagues, if there's one message that perhaps, and that is a personal thing here, in terms of, if there's one message that I would like to communicate there, that there's a certain responsibility and strong sense that comes with using vetiver grass, particularly as we saw the presenters really emphasize the issue of the root growth, and also the issue of, because of that root growth and how it is actually growing, it has a potential benefit here. Now, if there's one thing we don't want to do is to leave you all thinking that essentially you plant your vetiver grass, you turn your back and you go, and everything's supposed to be good. It's a very romantic notion of how we apply useful things, and sadly, it is often the way that things are done. Because you came from that seminar, you had vetiver is a good grass, you go, you source your vetiver, you throw it in the yard there, and you say that that is supposed to help me with my erosion. And you come and you realize that it did not have, so you come back and you say that the vetiver is not working. No. The issue there is that if the vetiver is planted, and it is planted in a certain way, and you have evidence that the roots are actually permeating and growing there, which is the main functional part for the erosion control here and slippage, then it should produce the results that we are speaking about. However, if you have planted this, the plant is growing, but the root system is sorely underdeveloped for one reason or the other, whether it is flooding or whether it's through some disease, etc., then it is not going to perform, or you are not going to reap the benefits that we are speaking about. What that means is that it is in your interest to actually check the roots, to dig up a one to plants, and to see how well or how healthy the root system is, and to what extent it is growing down. That becomes critical to, again, in terms of when you're thinking of a sense and whether you could plant vetiver anywhere. Vetiver by the roots going down into different layers, particularly where you talk about what is referred to as a fraction or slip layer. It is essentially, it is saying that if I'm able to grow down through the layers, and I'm actually, that serves like a kind of a widget or a tie between the different layers. If, for example, you're going down your planted vetiver, and by the time it is 6 inches, you meet a rock, you have a rock layer or an impermeable layer like a hard pan, that means that vetiver is not able to break through this within a year and go into the rock and grow into the rock and anchor itself there and create that bond that we are talking about. And so therefore, that means your land slippage here is still likely or more likely because it has not been able to create that tie. The effect of the land slippage is contingent on the vetiver being able to create that wedge or that tie between the multiple layers where the danger of slipping is. And so I just wanted to clarify this as we go forward to say that that is the reality on the ground. When you're thinking of this and expecting certain things, it must be expected on the condition that you evaluate the root system, understanding that, and the location and what you have to take into account. Thanks.
Thanks, Johnny. Then we'll take Augustus. Go ahead and ask your question. Are you there with us, Augustus? Okay, in the meantime, we just have a few more questions left from the chat. And can the vetiver grass act as a filter strip for runoff?
I'm there now.
Okay, go ahead, Augustus.
I'm there now. I'm Augustus Barnes from Dominica, Commonwealth of Dominica. And this program is a very, very good program. It's very interesting. I've learned a lot with what I heard, based on my experience. As I always say, Dominica, we had a rich culture of vetiver, and now that vetiver culture has disappeared in this generation. And I think this is a very good thing that we can bring back into Dominica, because what I have experience with vetiver, you can do mats, you can do all kinds of things with vetiver, especially now you can use the roots to do your perfumes and different things. The question I want to ask is that whether this program is going to give any assistance, either technical or whatever way, in developing some vetiver industry that could help build the Caribbean in getting closer to the green climate.
Can you repeat that question a bit? Whether this project is going to help to develop the industry to use vetiver for green climate action? Is that the question?
Yes. So where we can get byproducts out of it. So I'm talking about whether IICA or IICA can bring a core of people together in the region that will be able to develop vetiver as something, as an industry that will be able to be sustainable, bring sustainable income, and also have something local that we can use in our homes and in our different business places.
Okay, well, the short answer to this is one. This project is funded by the Caribbean Biodiversity Fund with resources from the German government and the German Environment Agency. So the CBF was established primarily to promote ecosystem-based adaptation approaches across the region. And this is just one of the CBF projects from the first call. So vetiver was this particular project. There are other projects. Secondly, one of our critical partners in this project, which is the IICA movement, the whole purpose of IICA movement and the whole everything for IICA movement is vetiver and green engineering. So anything in the Caribbean with respect to supporting the development of a vetiver-based industry, not just for green engineering, but also for green business, then IICA movement will be a critical partner moving forward as part of this project and beyond with IICA. IICA movement, I'm sure Nikolai will can tell you more about it, but IICA movement does have something called the House of Vetiver based in Trinidad, where they built a handicraft-based type of industry from the vetiver products. So that is already happening. What's important would be now to extend those experiences from Trinidad up the chain so that the other countries can create or build an industry from vetiver. You are correct. In Dominica, vetiver and screw pine and other grass for handicraft was a huge thing back in the day. And if you notice when the tourists come in, a lot of the handicraft products are not made from those indigenous grasses. So we have to build back that industry of the plaiting of the grass and the weaving of the grass into products and the roots into oils and so forth. So again, as normal, a project is always there for a specific time frame. When this project ends, we need to determine, just as you suggested, what are the things that can be scaled up and how they can be scaled up. And the scale up would have to include not just looking for donor resources to continue critical actions, but how we work with existing agencies on the ground. And one of the lessons learned from this particular project was that we had to work with community-based organizations. So we have NGOs in Antigua, we have in Dominica, we have in Tobago, and we have in St. Lucia. Now, the NGOs themselves have to be strengthened in order for them to take this thing on and continue with it. There's a comment in the chat where the ASTT offered some land to do vetiver propagation. So we need to work with partners who are on the ground who can sustain this effort beyond and in between externally funded projects that come and go. So it is up to the countries to determine whether it's something that they want to invest in. It is up to the countries to agree that green engineering or EBA-based solutions are critical for climate action and to put the support behind it. And the support doesn't necessarily only have to be putting money through a project. The support can be doing what needs to be done to get the thing moving. Sometimes it's money, sometimes it's not. In Dominica, Kent will tell you that he had a nice Kudme session where they planted some vetiver on a farmer's land. So we need to bring back the traditional practices that were working, that will continue to work, and blend them with modern efforts in order for us to build industries moving forward. Those that are green business based and those that can provide green and climate action. This project ends in March 2023. So between now and March 2023, we need to discuss with the project countries what can be continued and how they can continue, and how we can extend to the other countries of the Caribbean that have an interest in extending.
Okay, thanks, Diane. And we have one which speaks in terms, because we spoke on the business side, that we could use the vetiver for the business part of things. But someone is asking now, what is the frontier between the business? What is the frontier between the business and the ecosystem sustainability, knowing that it can be dangerous for the environment if it's too profitable? And of course, if any one of you want to answer that, and probably the person, if any other further clarification needed on the question, we could go ahead.
Nikhil, that is why Jamie said at the beginning that we're not encouraging people, first of all, to do bad practices. And we always know that there is an ethical issue when it comes to the environment and economics. So these are things, and that is why the EBA, the concept of the EBA, which is people-driven or people-based and nature-driven, things like that. That is why we cannot separate the people and the planet in those initiatives. Once we do the separation, then the other P, which is profits, dominate. And that is why the model has to be absorbed by persons who want to use it, and has to be implemented properly, because once you start, according to you, you're right, once you start to get a lot of money from the grass, you start to see bad practices creep in and the profit motive driving everything. So in everything, not just in this EBA, in everything, we just have to have a balance. And the question becomes always promoting what are the good practices, always, and always not separating the green engineering from the green business. So one cannot work without the other. But of course, ethics are beyond certain things. So it's based on a human decision. We can't control human beings, as we can see right now with climate change. But we can try. But I would like perhaps to invite Nikolai to speak to the experience of building a green business industry based on the House of Vetiver that they have in Trinidad.
Okay, hi again, everyone. So yes, I'll just mention about building the green business. So you really do need to strive to integrate sustainability into the systems when you're developing projects like this. So what we aim to do is really empower communities by developing these sustainable systems. So for example, through the whole principle of utilizing the vetiver grass, we actually utilized a system called the VEEP model, which was uniquely developed in Trinidad by I Am Movement, right? So it's called the Vetiver Education and Empowerment Program. That is the model that we use, and empowerment is a really key word there, right? So that is why we try to not only do the workshop trainings, but we try to leave systems in place that allow for continuity after everyone has left and gone. So the question we really put to ourselves is what does the community do once we're all finished and once we're gone? How do they use these skills? Because if we don't leave any platform for them to use all these nice new handicraft skills, oftentimes it would just be lost again, right? So in Trinidad, what we did to support the local trainings of these community members, we established a collective organization, a collective business called the House of Vetiver, where we still encourage all persons who we've trained to continue to produce. And through the business, we have focused on actually trying to do all the marketing, the branding, and actually trying to grow that business sustainably. So it allows for the persons at the community level to continue production, to continue being excited about these green sustainable technologies, about utilizing it, about getting an income. And the more that they're able to use that is the more crafts and products that is able to be sold, right? And it keeps that engine alive, right? So the same would also go for actually utilizing the vetiver grass in supply. So if persons are well educated on how to identify land slippage issues, how to identify areas where you might need an EBA, right? An ecosystem-based solution, right? Or the Vetiver system, they would be able to identify it, approach someone, talk to them, identify how to do up a quote, right? How to organize supply and plants. They would have local community suppliers of these plants, so they would know where to source, and they could actually go about like getting new business, right? So we've had a lot of success here in Trinidad through that. And the more projects that you do and the more successes that you let people see this green technology that a lot of people would be skeptical about because it is particularly a grass, right? The more that persons see it works is the more excited persons get behind it, right? So yeah, so that's the advice that I would have to you there, is really about empowerment. So after you teach them, right? So that's why we try to leave the community nurseries, as I said. So plants would be available not only to persons from the immediate project, because as you all said, the project ends in March, but all the areas, all the countries where the project was deployed, there are community nurseries where I'm sure for a period afterwards, even persons who would now be coming on to the project poster or now coming across information on the Vetiver system would be able to access grass and education on it to be able to tackle some stuff themselves. And then again, that's where the empowerment comes from. So I hope that clears up anything there. Insofar that we continue doing work on it, we actually at IM Movement, we're hosting the first ever Caribbean Green Infrastructure Conference, right? That is going to be held on the 25th and 26th of October, right? Where we have, if you give me a second here, let me get some information on it. Yes, so IM Movement in partnership with the National Gas Company of Trinidad and Tobago, we're going to be hosting a Green Infrastructure Conference that is going to be highlighting a lot about the Vetiver system, ecosystem-based adaptation, green infrastructure tools that you can be used in climate adaptation, and how we can use this to benefit the Caribbean. Okay, so it's going to be an in-person and virtual event that we encourage persons to register for. We did share the link in the chat. The sponsors for this project, Caribbean Biodiversity Fund and IICA, they are both Caribbean community partners who will be participating in the event as well, where they will be showcasing, I imagine, a lot of this Caribbean related project and different green infrastructure related tools that you can use to help, we can use to help tackle climate change. So there is a lot of work going on in this sphere as it relates to utilizing not only the Vetiver system, but as the title of your project indicates, ecosystem-based adaptation tools, which incorporates Vetiver, but so much else, right? So feel free to check out the link in the chat and register for those of you all who can attend virtually as well.
Okay, thank you, Nikolai, and we will start wrapping up. We just have about 3 questions left, and which were addressed actually. So just to read it out so the persons feel comfortable that the questions were answered. Can the vetiver grass act as a filter strip for runoff from agricultural land? And can the vetiver be used as a fodder, or would it need to be supplemented with other feed? And can we use the leaves to make compost? And also just the last one, from your experience, does the vetiver attract slugs and snails?
Okay, so yes, right. So what was the first question? Again,
Can the vetiver grass act as a filter strip for runoff from agricultural lands?
Yes, so that was one of the first things Jamie mentioned in the vetiver system. When it's planted on the hedgerow, the grass, the leaves act as like a filter system. So that allows the water to pass through and a lot of the sedimentation to sit behind the vetiver, right? And that builds a flat terrace. So very quickly, yes. What is the next question?
The next one is, can the vetiver be used as fodder, or would it need to be supplemented with other feed?
In some parts of the world, it's used as fodder. Cows particularly like to eat it. But I guess it depends on it's nutritious. It's a C4 plant. So it's very nutritious, but I guess you would have to check to see if the animal likes it, you know, because cows eat it, goats sometimes pass and eat it, but not every grazing animal would eat it, you know, but it is edible. Jamie, you want to weigh in there?
I think we
Yes,
have Dean with us, who is a livestock specialist. Dean, sorry for putting you on the, yes, Craig?
Okay, Craig can talk about it.
I can weigh in on that based on my experiences with it thus far with the animals.
Sure, no problem.
What I've observed, cows eat it, but they only eat the young shoot. Once the shoot reach a certain age, they don't touch it. So I recognize it because where they are down at the Cook's landfill, there's no feed, just the vetiver grass that is the only grass that is there. And they only nibble on the young shoot. Well, once that shoot pass a particular age, which I can't tell you, they don't touch it. So that is something that we need to look into, but they don't touch it from what I've observed.
Okay, thanks for the experience there. We have on with us Dean, sorry for putting you on the spot. If you want to just provide some comment from your livestock expertise there.
Hi. Yes, sorry, I would have missed the comment. There was a livestock related comment. Please repeat.
Yes, so can the vetiver be used as fodder or would it need to be supplemented with other feed?
Oh, unfortunately, no. Vetiver is not very palatable. And we have heard this question come up already, but it's not very palatable. Unlike the others that are used for soil conservation, like your fever grass and your lemongrass, that sometimes we can incorporate into the feed, and sometimes we use them for nutraceutical purposes, like, you know, treating pneumonia and other things. But the vetiver, no, it's highly unpalatable. I probably would not recommend it, especially the sharpness of the leaves and so on. So not really a very suitable grass for incorporating into a feed, a feeding regime.
Thank you very much there for weighing in on that for us, Dean. And the last question I had, Nikolai, was can we use the leaves to make compost? And probably Cheney, if you want to jump in there in terms, because we did touch a bit on the composting. So if you want to give a bit of feedback there on incorporating vetiver in compost.
Yeah, just quickly before Cheney goes ahead, another great characteristic of the vetiver grass is vetiver, the species of grass, is something known as a C4 plant, a carbon 4 plant, right? So it has a particular characteristic of capturing more carbon from the atmosphere than other plants, right? It's a great feature this particular category of plants has. So even if you don't have slippage and you just want to contribute to carbon capture, vetiver is a great source of carbon capture. As that relates to building compost, I guess, yeah, Cheney, who's a compost specialist, can weigh in on the importance of having a carbon and nitrogen heavy base in your compost. But composting is a lot more than just throwing something on the ground. We call that mulching. So vetiver is great as a mulch to naturally decay, but to create a proper compost, yeah, you would have to follow the proper ratios. And I suppose Chani could chime in on that.
Yeah, Nicola, I think that you connected the dots quite nicely there. Not much more to say about it. With the compost, most of the grasses actually, those particularly even corn and corn-like grasses, most of the grasses, there's not only vetiver, there are C4 plants, and that's why one of the reasons they have a more efficient photosynthesis system, and that is why you would see that they tend to grow faster than some of the crops that we normally grow. That is why they're so aggressive, because they often have more efficient systems in terms of making food or using the sun and water here. That's the first thing to note. What that results in, for example, I could tell you that in a lot of the studies that we have done here, the normal, what people call savanna grass, or Oxonus cupressus, the scientific name, you normally see that the nitrogen percentage is even higher than in cow manure, which most persons think that a lot of the cow manure or cattle manure, I should say more precisely, they tend to add it to compost because they say it's an organic source of nitrogen. But we have found that a lot of the grasses, the normal lawn grasses, they tend to have higher amounts of nitrogen than even some of the cow manure, particularly if it is left there for a while to drain. So just to note that. What that means is that because composting requires a balance of nitrogen and also carbon and other nutrients, often one single source of material cannot be composted by itself. And so while the vetiver is good, and it could be good from the point of view of the nitrogen level and also the carbon, it should, for most efficient composting, which again is a managed process, it should be combined in a good ratio with other materials. The good thing about any of the grass like the vetiver is that from my experience, I would highly recommend it even more than some of the cattle manure. If you could make compost without some of the cattle manure, that would be, in my opinion, it normally leads to a better quality compost, simply from the point that some of the cattle manure and some other manures, what they tend to do, while they do add some biological things in terms of microorganisms, they also come along with salt content. And so therefore, at the end, your end product tends to have some high level of what we call electrical conductivity or salt levels that often inhibits the plant seedling growth or development as well, which is again along the line of not having this romantic notion of, because it's compost, everything is going to be good. The quality of the compost and that fact checked is also very important in terms of determining the use and the potential benefits. So I'll wrap that up there. I hope the point is very clear, and most of all, it could be used as soon as possible. Thanks.
Okay, great, thank you, Chani. And we had one other question coming in there in the chat. Can vetiver grass be used with mangroves with the aim of strengthening the coastal land as a part of sea defense? Probably with the experience in Antigua, probably Craig, you would want to weigh in on this question.
Repeat that question, Nicolia.
Can vetiver grass be used with mangroves with the aim of strengthening the coastal land as part of sea defense?
Yes, I would fully recommend it. But as I said, as I alluded to in my presentation, I would, the form of preparing those seedlings would have to be addressed first with respect to how you're going to plant them. And I would recommend putting them in planting bags first, let them get a good root establishment, and then you do the transfer. Also, I would also recommend taking at least a soil test. That is something that we did to determine the soil content. What we did with our bags, we actually mixed the soil. So we mixed the soil from different areas, including the area that where we're going to plant them, and we got the result. The result that we received was the soil that we mixed from that area and the soil from where we established the nursery was the best mixture for us to use going forward if we're going to install more plants in our area. So yes, I think it works well. But those are some of the measures I think you need to take into consideration. I don't know, where is that question coming from? Which country?
I'm not sure at the moment. I just copied and pasted.
Guyana.
So,
okay. It seems like it's Guyana. So Guyana, unlike Antigua, has a lot of rain. So I think that prolonged drought that we experience normally in Antigua, you wouldn't have it. So I don't think the installation of a water irrigation system would be a problem for you guys, because you always have rain, you always have water. So yes, I would recommend that.
thanks, Craig. Nikolai, based on IICA Movement's experience, you want to chime in there a bit on using it for coastal defense?
Yes. So again, another thing a good thing to keep in mind is how you can't plant the vetiver in too much of shade. So it would be prudent to remember that a mangrove is usually very, very shady. If you're trying to reestablish a mangrove on a empty coastline, again, you would have to establish the saline levels of the soil to understand if it's too extreme for vetiver, but vetiver can't tolerate some levels of saline. And in that condition, you could use it as a, we offered some suggestions to persons in Barbados once. So you could utilize the vetiver as a kind of fixing, in a kind of fixing manner, where you use it to, as Jamie would have mentioned, in a succession planting manner. So you utilize a small section of vetiver hedgerow to prevent the mangrove from washing out when you now plant it. So that was an issue that persons raised with us when trying to do mangrove restoration, that sometimes during a heavy storm event or rainfall event, the water just washes out the new plantings or the young seedlings. So they really have to let the plant establish before they plant it. So the vetiver can be used in that case, but it's pretty difficult, especially given the shade in an established mangrove or a semi-established mangrove. But on coastal defense, yes, in areas where you don't have mangrove is a very good coastal protection tool. So you could use it to protect dunes that would be on the beachfront. It grows well into the sand. It could tolerate a lot of the salt water. So that would be washing from the sea. And it works well to hold the dunes in place there. On other areas as well. So we have a great example in Trinidad on the south coast called Quinam Beach, where we utilize the Vetiver system in conjunction with other harder engineered solutions such as gabion baskets and just some light terracing instead of a full seawall, right? So it saved a lot of money utilizing this different system, this more nature-based solution, right? And that was a combination of vetiver grass, gabion baskets, and terracing instead of just one large concrete wall, right? So that's the experience that we do have with it. It does work. There are large international case studies as well of it being used along large expanses of coastline, of beachfront, literally directly planted along the shore, where it grew into this nice healthy hedgerow. In those cases though, you would need proper establishment. I know someone commented that the plants really struggled in the dry season when they were trying to rehabilitate a quarry. We find that in sandy soils, in dry temperatures, they tend to become very acidic and they could affect plants. So that's something we really had to try to balance out. So in those cases, you try to make use of drip irrigation in those very highly salty and hot conditions.
Okay, thanks, Nikolai. Chani, before I bring you in to just talk a bit more on the root system and the feed using vetiver, the St. Kitts office seem to have probably missed some of your questions. You can go ahead and open your mic and ask your question. St. Kitts, are you there to ask your questions? Okay, so while we wait for St. Kitts, Chani, if you want to go ahead and weigh in on the root system and the vetiver as a feed.
Yeah, colleagues, I was just replaying the two comments that were made in terms of the experience that Craig would have shared in terms of how the cattle feeds on the vetiver versus what Dean also said in terms of the vetiver not being an ideal plant to be part of a system for feed. They might sound contrary, but they are opposite, but they really are not. Meaning that I think the perspective that Dean is coming from is that essentially if you're looking for a good mix of plants and you're looking for the most palatable and nutritious plants and you're looking at it to be part of a feeding program or feed program, then vetiver, because of its palatability, perhaps the ratio of lignin there and other things like lignin here, it would not be the first choice that you would consider. However, as we know with other plants, the issue with plants is that lignin content or that issue of palatability is less the younger they are. So they, just like human beings, the bones of the child or the younger ones and the flexibility tends to be a little more pliable and softer at an early age. But as we start to mature, there's this solidification and rigidity that takes place that makes it very hard to bend, and in that case, digest, etc. So just to weigh in on that particular thing, they are not divergent views, and also to introduce there that in cases of survival, you will see that livestock and plants, and other species tend to revert to things that they would not traditionally consume because you have that particular survival thing being kicked in there. The other thing I wanted to quickly say there before we turn off to the questions from St. Kitts is that we have tried to present some general guidelines in terms of how you would prepare the slips, etc. I would caution also that the recommendation with cutting the roots to a particular length, that also must be understood from the point that the vetiver has several types of roots. The types of roots that the vetiver have, so if you were to go and take off a vetiver plant, you would see the bigger roots or fatter roots that looks almost like what you see corn when corn is growing. We call that the brace roots or the prop roots here. The main function of these roots are really anchorage, so they're to hold the plant there in the soil here. But there are other roots that are thinner and that seem to have the hairy stuff on them here. These are the roots that when you are transplanting there, you will need to ensure that your plant has some of these thin roots here, the fine roots, the finer roots here, simply because these are the main roots that will be responsible for taking up nutrients and water there. I've seen in certain circumstances that persons follow the recommendations, they cut the roots and all they remain with is the brace roots. That does not allow for easy adaptation to the conditions where they're transferring to. And so therefore you have stunted plants and you have a longer time for the plant to establish themselves. So I'm just putting this here from the practical point of view. When you're looking at the root system, ensure that when you are cutting or when you are transplanting, there are brace roots, yes, but also the finer roots, which are the main roots that are responsible for the uptake of nutrients and water.
Thank you, Chani. Caillou, you can go ahead. I believe this would be the St. Kitts.
Hello.
Hi, good day. Go ahead.
Yes, this is Muriel Seaton Paul from St. Kitts. I'm a backyard gardener and a crafter. I live near the sea, so I would like the grass for retaining the area near the sea, and I live close to a river also. So my question is, how do I go about getting the grass to St. Kitts, and the monetary, how much does it cost to obtain the grass? To come to, do I have to go to the agriculture department because they're gonna want to quarantine anything that comes in, plant that comes in?
Nikelia, perhaps Kent and Craig can respond to that, because Kent and Craig were the ones that managed the process of preparing the grass in Dominica, meeting all the phytosanitary SPS requirements, and exporting the grass to Antigua, and in Antigua clearing the grass with the ministry. So perhaps you can just give a brief on that.
Thank you.
Okay, let me jump at it first, Kent. With respect to that question, so Antigua and Barbuda was the recipient country, and so one of the first things that we did was we basically contacted the plant protection unit within the Ministry of Agriculture. So the Ministry of Agriculture Plant Protection Unit then contacted the Ministry of Agriculture Plant Protection Unit in Dominica. They had a conversation and they decided on how the plants should be prepared in Dominica and how the plants should arrive in Antigua. So based on their assessment in terms of how they should arrive and how they should be prepared, IICA Antigua and Barbuda, IICA Dominica, and Dominica followed those recommendations. And once those recommendations were adhered to, the plants were then shipped to Antigua. When they arrived in Antigua, they arrived according to the recommendations that were made by the plant protection unit in Antigua. They basically met us at the port. They inspected the boxes, and then because the project is supporting the Ministry of Agriculture, we took them to a unit within the forestry division where we quarantined them there for about a week or two. And after the quarantine period, we basically began to plant. In your case, I think you would have to contact, I can't remember her name, in St. Kitts. She's head of the plant protection unit in St. Kitts and Nevis. So I think it's to have a conversation with, I see my colleague Stuart here, or Bell. Stuart is online. What's her name, Stuart? But the head of the plant protection unit, I think she would have to be somebody you can get in contact with. And then she can basically contact me and I can put her on to Dr. Go Francis. And Dr. Go Francis would basically put something together in terms of how we would have to prepare them in Antigua to send them to St. Kitts. And I think that is
Craig,
what
that is Kelly.
That is
Jamie Craig?
Yeah, what's her name, Lindbergh?
Kelly, Miss Kelly. I can't remember her first name, Miss Kelly, so deals with that part. So once you can touch base with her, she can then give us what procedures we'll have to go through to be able to procure it, how to be secured once it reach here, and what we have to do.
Right. So it's just a matter of touching base with Kelly at the plant protection in St. Kitts. She can contact me. I think she has my contact. And then I will then have a conversation with Dr. Go Francis in Antigua and then see both plant protection unit will have a conversation, and then based on their recommendation, that is how we can then prepare the plants and send them to St. Kitts. I don't know if Kent want to weigh in terms of how they dealt with it in Dominica.
Okay, just before Kent probably come in there, I'm seeing Sharon that's the technical specialist, eco-technical specialist in St. Kitts, have indicated that the Nevis Agriculture have plants available. So persons in St. Kitts and Nevis interested could probably reach out to the Ministry of Agriculture for plants there. Or if you could reach out to Sharon in the IICA office, she could probably provide you with some more guidance as to how you can get the plants.
Okay, mute.
Sorry. Did you all hear about the Nevis plants available by the Ministry of Agriculture?
Yes, we did. We did hear that.
Okay, great.
Yes.
So I was just saying we have reached our 12 o'clock mark for the session, 2-hour session. And I would like to say thank you to everyone who have participated. If Diane or Jamie or Chani, if you all just want to say one last thing that you want to share with the participants before we close. In the meantime, I will be sharing a feedback poll.
Okay, let me jump in here, right? I would first like to thank everyone for the level of interest that they showed in not specifically the project, but in the use of this particular grass for a green engineering solution. The project is just a project. The purpose was to promote and facilitate the adoption of this particular green engineering tool. What we need moving forward are persons who are willing to take it on and to continue the process. So anybody on this forum who has a direct and keen and strong interest in pursuing this and taking it forward and supporting and creating a supportive ecosystem for this ecosystem-based adaptation with this and other grasses, you can link up with us in this project. We are already connected to IAM and other partners, so we can create that ecosystem for this EBA type of initiatives moving forward. So I believe, Nikelia, you would have the list of names of the persons on the chat. So it's just a matter of reaching out and seeing how they want to connect with us, and we can create that system either via WhatsApp chat group for those who are interested to share the information. Because one of the things that came out in this is, while we have been speaking really only about vetiver grass, there are so many other EBA type green engineering solutions that can complement the vetiver grass, and between the green engineering needs to complement gray engineering or the traditional brick and mortar engineering. So I think it's important for us, particularly in our small island states, the small island states where we, and particularly like Dominica, the mountainous one, where we do have landslides, both in the dry and the wet season, that we need to be able to do things that the communities themselves can take under their control and can do it, so that we don't have to depend on heavy engineering solutions at the community level. A lot of our communities, their houses are falling down for the slopes, the roads are falling down. So we need to be able to do things at the community almost on a daily basis to maintain our lands, to maintain our soils, and to maintain our resilience. So anybody who's willing to reach out, they can reach out to any one of us in the project, Chani and Nikelia included, and we can create that kind of ecosystem for EBA type green engineering linked to green business solutions. So thank you for all your interest, and thank you, Jamie, for toiling and preparing and presenting on behalf of the project, and Nikelia and Chani, as usual, the project technical specialists as well, and advisors. So thank you for giving us the opportunity to present and to promote and to speak about what the project has been doing and is trying to do. Let me just confirm, this is not a perfect project. There is no perfect project. The project had its own ins and outs and problematic areas, but if it didn't have it, we would not have learned. So I think the learning that is coming out of this project is going to be critical to moving forward. Thanks a lot, Nikelia.
Thank you very much, Diane, for that. And of course, it is always our pleasure to try and bring out the activities and the actions that IICA is doing in the region. And this is one of the key initiatives we felt would be quite important to share with the stakeholders. I would ask Jenny now to just say a few words before we close.
Yeah, colleagues, I wanted to extend the thanks there again. I wanted to perhaps leave you with something that I think is very important here. One is the issue that we need to start continuing observing and extending to that body of knowledge there by one, understanding the principles, and I hope you would have understood that from the use of the vetiver as a model plant, but more so what actually makes it the model plant in terms of the root system, in terms of how it grows, and also how efficiently it is able to grow there. With that said, with that framework, I encourage you to start paying more attention to some of the plants that you have right around you in your area here. And using these principles, perhaps select or test some of these plants around you. I saw Dean in the chat put elephant grass, but the main thing for us, if this is to work, is for persons to take the principles there. And where vetiver is not available, you have that technical do-it-yourself kind of framework that you could, within your environment, select the plants that may be useful for you. So that is a main takeaway here. If any, how do you have we imparted that understanding that you could use to actually select and add to the knowledge? And obviously, we'd be more than grateful if you want to share that with us. We are planning another iteration of this forum going forward, where we will soon open up the opportunities for persons to want to present here, the avenue. Once you have done some of the work here, you could opt to be a presenter based upon what you have learned or gathered here. And definitely we would consider that there, because we definitely think a lot of the knowledge is with the people here, and we would really like to get that there in a particular way. So with that, I say thank you, and I do acknowledge the efforts of the persons that are here, both IICA IM movement, etc., and persons that are even behind the screen that would have led up to that particular product. So thank you very much, and do have a wonderful rest of the afternoon.
Thank you, Chani. And so since this is our last forum, if we could get persons to open up their cameras so we could get some screenshots for the reporting, and that would be great. And in the meantime, I would like to extend special thanks to all of you for participating. Those who would have participated from the first up till the third one, special thanks and taking the time off. And I do hope that the session has been very informative for you. It has been information that you could use within a short space of time. And of course, we cannot provide you with all information, but do feel free to reach out to us and we will try to guide you accordingly. If there is anything available online that we can share to build up on some of the topics that we're presenting on, I will try my best to share those. I know somebody wanted to ask if, how they can connect with the participants. So persons, who want to communicate with each other, please let me know if you want your information to be shared and I can do so. So we will take a bit of the screenshots there. Jamie, if you could help me with those, that would be great. And of course, as I mentioned, for persons who would have participated in 2 or more of the sessions, you will be receiving a certificate of participation. I might need just a little bit of time as I will be traveling for work soon. So within a 2-week period, 3 weeks maximum, if you could just give me some time to sort it out and you will receive those. So ready, Jamie?
Yes, ready. First screen.
Say cheese. Say
Cheese.
Vetiver.
Okay, next screen. Cheese. Third screen. Smile, everyone. Wow, lots of persons here.
Yes, I think we
Okay,
have
got
almost
you.
200 people there.
Okay, thank you so much. I think I got everyone with cameras on.
Okay, yeah. Thank you, everybody. And I do wish everyone a pleasant week, continuation of the week. I will be sharing information with you after the session. And if there is any other information you require, as I said, do feel free to contact us, as we have the IICA offices that do local level activities in collaboration with the ministry. And so just reach out to us and we could guide you accordingly. Thank you. And I wish everyone a lovely day.
Bye. Thank you.
Have a good day.
Enjoy your day also.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Great
Bye.
meeting you.
Everyone.
Everyone.
Bye.
Thank
you, Goodbye.
Enjoy your day.
Bye.
Most welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome. Have a good day.
Bienvenue.
Merci beaucoup. Au revoir.
Thank you very much. A wonderful program.
Most welcome, Doreen. You have a lovely day.
Thank you.
Very much. Really appreciate it. Great program.
Thank you. And looking forward to future participation.
Looking forward to continue. And I want to participate in all the programs.
Thanks, Augustus. Thanks, Kwesi.
I want to push it in Dominica back again to where it was.
Okay, excellent. So you could just reach out to the IICA office, Dominica, if any support required there, any information, guidance, lessons learned from the project. I think that. Bye. Goodbye. Have a lovely day. Bye-bye. Thank you for joining in. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you.
Most welcome.